feel guilt. Remorse. Right. People who have sociopathic tendencies do feel remorse, but are happy to break the law because we're the good guys and it's all about the end result.
For the cause.
It's for the cause. God and country. And in retrospect, I have or had sociopathic tendencies. For example, and stop me if I told you this already, but when I was going through the application process, I'd been recommended by my grad school advisor, so I didn't physically apply. So I'm in this group setting with 3 or 4 other applicants, and the proctor says, you're a CIA officer overseas. You get a cable from headquarters telling you that headquarters really needs the latest Indonesian economic figures, and you have to go get it. So go. What do you do? Well, you seek out the Indonesian economic secretary at the embassy. You start working him, take him to lunch, take him to dinner. He mentions he likes fishing. You charter a boat. You go deep sea fishing. You get your wives together. You have them over your house. Maybe you go away for the weekend. You become great friends. But 6 months into it, you realize he's just not recruitable. So then what do? And this guy raises his hand and he says, well, you double down, go another 6 months, spend more money on him. This woman raises her hand. She says, maybe you work it through the wives. Maybe the wives become closer. And I'm looking around like, what? I raise my hand. I said, you break into the embassy and you steal it. And the guy goes, that's exactly what you do. That's a sociopathic tendency. A normal person won't default to breaking into a foreign embassy and stealing classified
It's the last thing that comes to a normal person's mind.
Right. It was the first thing that came to my mind.
If you're like me and you grow frustrated sometimes about ways that you can make a positive impact, I can tell you one of the simplest things that you can do that goes such a thing, a target or whatever, you kind of think of worst case scenarios or how would I do it if you find yourself doing that.
If I do it this way, is the guy going to shoot me in the face? Or is he going to say, oh, let's have a beer?
It's kind of an important distinction.
That's exactly right.
So you talk about recruiting. Has anyone ever tried to flip you or recruit you in the past?
Yeah.
How did you navigate that?
Well, the first time, I didn't even realize it was happening. And I got to thinking about it later. There's no harm in saying who it was. It was a Hungarian intelligence officer. And so I reported it. And I said, this is probably nothing, but I just wanted to be on the safe side, so I reported it. And then headquarters came back and said, oh no, he's an identified intelligence officer. Good for reporting it. So I just stayed away from it. Then there was one time where I was assigned to work with this French idiot from the French intelligence service. And I called him and I said, okay, so we're supposed to do this thing together. Where do you want to meet? He said, well, meet me at the corner of, A and B. I thought that was odd, but okay. So I'm standing there at the corner of A and B. He comes down this alley, makes a right turn, and he's like, get in, we only have 15 seconds. And I'm like, no. I'm not a clandestine source of yours. I'm not going to take the 15-second window to jump in your car. If you haven't done a surveillance detection route, I'm just going to meet you at the Pizza Hut, and we're going to have our meeting there. But I'm not doing this clandestine game thing with you. No. And afterwards, I wrote headquarters. I was like, tell the French they need to change their MO because I'm not doing this with this guy.
So it was that apparent though?
Yeah, it was ridiculous. Because there were times where I expected a pitch that never came. I expected the Greeks to pitch me. Never even a hint. I expected the Russians at some point. Nothing at all. So you just never know. Sometimes you're just a target of opportunity for an odd outlying service. Let me say one other thing too. When I was senior staff member on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I was there from 2009 to midway through 2011. I was the chief investigator. And I got a call from a Japanese diplomat who said, hey, let's go to lunch. I said, great. I love doing this. I love going out with foreign diplomats and just talking about whatever happens to be in the news.
It's post-CIA.
It's post-CIA. So we go out to this steakhouse and perfectly delightful lunch. I remember what we talked about. We talked about the Middle East peace process, Israeli elections, and Turkish elections. And at the end of it, I said, well, thank you for meeting me. This was a lovely lunch. And he said, no. Before you leave, he said, what's next for you? And I should add, his English was so bad that we did the lunch in Arabic. He was an Arabist. Yeah. So I said, well, I think I'm going to resign soon. I promised Senator Kerry. John Kerry was the chairman at the time. I promised Senator Kerry I'd give him 2 years. It's been 2.5. I have 5 kids. I still have to put 3 through college. So I said, I need to make some money. And he goes, don't resign. If you give me information, I can give you money. And I said, what is wrong with you? How dare you cold pitch me like that? Do you have any idea how many times I've made that pitch? Shame on you, I said. And I got up and I walked out and I went directly without stopping to the office of the Senate security officer. So I go in there and I said, I was just pitched by a foreign intelligence officer. And he said, was it that damn Russian again? And I said, no, Japanese. He goes, Japanese? I said, yeah, I know. I'm shocked too. And he said, well, the Japanese poke around every once in a while on trade issues. I said, this was a direct cold pitch.
Right. Nothing subtle about it.
Nothing subtle at all. No room for confusion. So he says, write it up on the standalone computer that's not connected to the internet, and I'll send it to the FBI. So I wrote it up. He sends it to the FBI. The next day he calls me. He says, 2 FBI agents want to come up and interview you. I said, okay, great. I meet them in SCIF, the secure conference, special compartmented information, whatever. It's a secure conference.
Got it.
So these 2 young guys come up and they said, here's what we want you to do. We want you to invite him to lunch and try to get him to tell you exactly what information he wants and how much money he's willing to pay for it. And I said, okay, you want me to wear a wire or something? They said, no, we're going to be at the next table. We'll listen to everything. I said, okay. So I invite him to lunch. He lays it all out. These guys had called me right before the meeting and said something came up, we can't do it, just write up another memo. I thought that was odd, but okay, I write the memo, I send it. And I always prided myself on my accounts of my meetings. They're very fulsome. So then they asked me to do it, the 3rd meeting, 4th meeting, 5th meeting.
Are they showing up at these?
No, just write them up. So I'm writing every detail. He said this, I said that. He did this, I did that. Back and forth, like you're in the room. So at the last meeting, to the restaurant in Georgetown, he says to me, I just got promoted, got my dream job, I'm going to be the number 2 at the Japanese embassy in Cairo. I said, congratulations, never saw him again. A year later, I get arrested after blowing the whistle on the phone. And we get 15,000 pages of classified discovery. And it turns out, we get these memos, there was no Japanese diplomat. He was an FBI agent, pretending to be a Japanese diplomat. And they did 5 meetings with me because I kept reporting the contact back to the to the FBI.
Right.
And so finally he writes, he's clearly not going to take the bait, suggest we end this operation. So they were trying to get me to commit actual espionage because they wanted to charge me with espionage.
But what did they think you were going to give up? You'd already, by this time you'd gone on television and talked about the 9/11 program, so they thought you were just somebody that was just going to comment a bunch of stuff?
Yeah.
And anything, they were just fishing for anything?
Anything they could charge me with a crime. And I never gave him anything, and I kept reporting the contact back.
So do you think that has anything to do with how they ended up charging you? Can you go into detail a little bit more, just to kind of give us a little background into what you were charged with and how that kind of unfolded? Because I know last time we talked specifically about the interview you went on, and that some of that stuff you thought was public information already. It wasn't like, I'm going to go on this show and I'm going to out everything.
No,
you were quite upset about the 9/11 program.
Yeah, I was.
But it wasn't necessarily an intentional thing where you were bound and determined to let it out.
No. So I said three things in that interview. This was an interview with ABC News and a subsequent interview with the New York Times. I said that the CIA permits prisoners, which was illegal. I said that there was official U.S. government policy, also illegal. And I said that the policy had been personally approved by the president himself, which he had denied, and then admitted. So they charged me with 3 counts of espionage for speaking to ABC News and the New York Times. They charged me with 1 count of violating the Intelligence Identities Protection Act of 1982. And they charged me with making a false statement. We were never clear on exactly what the false statement was supposed to have been. But they knew that those espionage charges were made up. There was a memo from John Brennan in Discovery to Eric Holder, who was the Attorney General. And he said, charge him with espionage. And Eric Holder wrote back and said, my people don't think he committed espionage. And then Brennan wrote back and said, charge him anyway and make him defend himself. So they charged me with 3 counts of espionage. This is a death penalty charge. They charged me with 3 counts. And then when I went bankrupt, they dropped the charges. See, so what they were hoping was that I would actually tell this pretend Japanese diplomat something that wasn't public, so they could charge me with actual espionage.
Right. So that was tied in directly to, because by that time they were looking to charge you.
Yeah.
And so they were trying to substantiate the charges that they had out there, because otherwise the FBI was thinking, there really isn't anything here.
Yeah, there's nothing there. Right.
That's insane. So how does it feel? I can only imagine how it would feel for you, knowing damn well that you're innocent of these charges that have been laid upon you, but you take a plea deal.
Mm-hmm.
So in some states it's not even legal to take a plea deal and say, I plead guilty to this, even though I don't think that I did it.
Well, I stood up in court. We negotiated the deal, right? I was facing 45 years. That was their offer, was 45 years. And then I offered to take a plea